So, the 2023 preseason testing is over. Now, let's take a critical eye and actually analyze what happened, so that you can have an idea of the pecking order. So let's start off with Williams. The British team has actually made some big steps during the winter, and their car has taken a big step forward in direction of the mid-pack. The drivers seemed really happy with it, both Logan Sargent and Alexander Albon. Now, I'm not really surprised that Logan Sargent is happy with the car. After all, he's a Formula 2 driver who's just made his step into Formula 1, so he's just happy to be there. However, Alexander Albon being happy is a bit of a different story. If you think about it, Alexander Albon has driven for Red Bull and for AlphaTauri before that, when AlphaTauri was a bit more competitive, so he knows how a car should behave, let's put it at that. Now, with him being happy, it's actually a pretty big deal. This means that the car is much better this year, and you could see it on track as well, the car being much more docile, it wasn't really stabbing out with the rear, which was a big issue last year. This year the car seems to be much more stable and planted. One thing that I have also noticed is that the car lacks a lot of downforce. So the car is really fast in the straight line, but when it comes time to actually put on some downforce, it quickly falls down, it don't really have a lot of downforce. So what I think will happen is that the car will chew a lot of his rear tires, because there is no downforce, so the car will slide a lot. But in tracks like Monza or Baku, the car might be a little bit better because it's more focused on straight line speed. Still, the car shows real promise, and just in testing they've actually beaten their 2022 time in qualifying last year, so it's pretty huge. We can expect some pretty big things from Williams this year. I'm not saying race wins or a lot of points, but compared to last year I think they will be a lot more competitive, and that's always a good thing. Now we go over to AlphaTauri. The Italian team actually is going to be a dark horse this year. They don't really seem to have made a big step over the winter. I mean, sure, they improved their car, but in comparing it with the rest of the grid, there is not really a big evolution. One thing though that surprised me is the fact that Nick DeVries is actually really vocal about how crap the car is. So he doesn't really take anything for granted. He puts down his opinion with no fears, and from what Franz Tost actually said is that he likes a driver like that. Apparently both Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda were not really vocal. I mean, Pierre Gasly was vocal, but it was not adamant that that was the way that he wanted the car, whilst Nick DeVries is. So it's a big change at AlphaTauri. So much so that the engineers actually stood their ground and started saying, no, this is the way that we should go about things. And then Franz Tost actually defended their driver, which is refreshing to see, and maybe a breath of fresh air onto the team. On other news, however, I might have a crystal ball. I don't know, because I actually predicted that the team would be sold in the near future. And guess what? Basically, there are 3 companies interested in buying AlphaTauri. Honestly, it doesn't really surprise me. The team isn't giving any big performances, so not a lot of points. They're just to advertise AlphaTauri's clothing or brand, which is basically Red Bull's brand of clothing, and they're not really selling a lot of clothes. It might be because a pair of jeans is $300. I think when you compare it with Benetton, which was pretty much the biggest success that a clothing brand achieved on the racetrack, it's clear to see that, I mean, Benetton was not the cheapest, but they are not really insanely expensive like AlphaTauri is. AlphaTauri has some style, sure, but it's not a lot of style for the money that it is. So I understand why they are looking to sell. Honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal for a team, and I think they will be sold. Currently there are 3 companies interested. I'm not going to say which ones, because, you know, with Formula 1 these things change weekly, so what's the point in me actually saying which teams are interested or which companies are interested? Things will change. I will keep you updated. Next up, Haas. Haas was actually looking pretty good. I think that they have made some steps forward, not huge steps forward. I think they're getting the hang of their car. I think they will be a little bit more competitive this year. However, the big highlight of the team right now, it's not on the car, it's on 2 other things. One, their driver with Nico Hülkenberg. I mean, we already know Kevin Magnussen is really good and is solid and is doing his job, so Kevin, great job, get out. Now let's focus on Nico. Nico, however, is still learning the car. He doesn't even know the steering wheel right now, so that's kind of weird to me. Before drivers actually get into the car and go the full Grand Prix distance, they put a lot of hours on the simulator, and the fact is that if Nico doesn't still know the entirety of the steering wheel, I don't think that's really good, because it means that Nico isn't really putting a lot of hours in the simulator. Basically, that's how you sum that up. So he needs more hours in the simulator, maybe in a better simulator as well, because it's Haas, they don't really have a lot of money. But to me, the biggest news on Haas is their pit wall. This is kind of a meme, but basically you can compare it, both Haas and Red Bull. It's insane. The pit wall of Haas is much smaller, but there is a reason for it. Basically, with the new 2023 regulations, actually 2022, but they are a bit stiffer now, but the 2022 regulations on the financial side actually consider as part of your budget for the year the transit of everything, including not only the cars and the parts, but also the pit wall. So what they decided to do is create a really small pit wall, which basically folds down, and they will even devolve it even more into just a wall, basically, with maybe a support on top, just so they don't get rained on and bring some of these chairs from somewhere. And that's how they intend to do it, basically saving money on shipping, which they probably will use to the car, which in my opinion, whilst it looks, kind of crappy, I think it's a good measure for a smaller team. I think they are doing good. Let's wait and see. I don't really have a lot to say about Haas, however, so this is where it ends. Now Aston Martin. Again, I must be sleeping with a crystal ball underneath my pillow. Aston Martin is looking insane, and thank God they are. I'm really happy. I think Alonso, for the first time in his career, made a positive career change. It's incredible. So let's take a look at what Aston Martin has done over the winter. Basically, their car design has changed a bit of the car comparing to last year. They adopted the philosophies of three teams, Ferrari, Red Bull and Alpine, and they have managed to create a car which is really fast, is a bit stiff. The car is a bit stiff, but it can be evolved, and that's more so setup wise than really the structure of the car, so they can tweak it a bit. The car looks really good, so much so in fact that there are speculations that the Mercedes is a bit slower than Aston. Now, I'm going to be honest, this is all speculation. There was even someone, I think it was Fabrega on Twitter, saying that they were running with more fuel than Mercedes and putting it 3/10 behind, and the time should be 4/10 slower, so they would be faster than Mercedes by a lap, by 1/10. That's all BS to me. I don't buy anything. We don't know anything about Mercedes, and we don't know anything about Aston on how they ran their cars. So let's not put our race car in front of the horses, so to speak. Basically, Aston Martin is looking really good, but I don't expect a lot before we see it on the first race. I do think they are really strong though, and that's great. On another note for Aston Martin though, unfortunately their driver Lance Stroll suffered a fall and reportedly broke both wrists. Now, there's either two schools of thought here. One, if he really broke his wrists, he's out of commission. Honestly, they are saying that he will be back for the first Grand Prix in Bahrain, but if he broke his wrists, it will take a long time to heal. So it doesn't really make sense for him to jump in the car right now. So either he broke his wrists and he's not coming back right now, and Drogovic supposedly will take his place for the future Grand Prix, or he didn't really break his wrists. And it was just BS from the media, which, without confirmation from the driver, we cannot tell. However, I don't think it's looking really good because Drogovic actually drove a little bit more than was programmed. They are playing it safe. I think Drogovic will drive at least in Bahrain. I don't know if he will drive the rest of the year, but I can understand the fact that Lance Stroll actually wants to get back into the car ASAP, even without any training. I mean, if the car is looking as fast as it is, what do you expect? Of course that he wants to go back. Of course that he wants to drive a car. Now Alfa Romeo. They're looking solid. Their drivers are looking stress-free. The car is looking pretty good. However, they did have a little issue on the morning of the third day. Not really a big problem. They fixed it. By the afternoon it was already out. They put on some good laps, but not great. I think it was evolution. However, I think that the car might come a bit more alive when the front wing upgrades come out on the mid of the season. I think that the car has been designed, well, all cars are designed basically from the front to the back, and when you take in consideration that the team already needs to do some upgrades at the front, that means that when the front upgrades hit, all of the car will work much better. So I think that's how we must look at it now. The team is solid, but the car will become better with time. Now McLaren. Well, they are screwed, just like I said 2 videos ago. Remember, they're looking slow, the car isn't really giving great impressions. Lando is already defeated and he hasn't even started the year yet, so he's probably looking to jump ship, and I don't blame him. If you actually saw the news as well, you could see that McLaren has actually put on a statement saying that they have not hit the targets for the 2023 season, and I fully believe them. I mean, the car is not looking good. Honestly, the car is not looking good, so I don't really expect anything from the team. I think you can consider this year basically as a growing year for Oscar Piastri. The issue is that if he proves himself to be really good, he might be poached off, because this is a relatively new contract, so I think his exit clause is bigger than his contract value, so it's easy pickings for a bigger team. The thing is, McLaren has really fallen a lot. I don't know what the issue with the team is. Well, Andreas Heidel leaving is a big issue with the team, but they have money, they just don't have the team or the infrastructure. Yes, English. I think that one of the things that Zach Brown should look into is keeping talent, which clearly they are not doing. So that's the biggest issue for them right now. They should look into keeping talent ASAP. Now let's take a turn into Alpine. Alpine is a bit of a different story. They are the other dark horse this year. So along with AlphaTauri, Alpine right up there. Fully French outfit this year, French team, French engine, French drivers. And even Otmar Szafnauer is French, I think he's French. And their CEO is also French, so sacré bleu. Their car is looking really, really stiff, and that's obviously a bit of an issue. They need to fix it, because while it's great for some tracks, like in Jeddah, which is the second race of the season, and they'll be strong there, in the first race of the season you could see just how much the drivers were locking up. The car didn't really seem too quick though. It's really surprising. I was expecting a lot more from Alpine. Now, once again, this is testing, this means nothing, sort of. The reliability seemed to be a bit better though, which is a good sign. However, even if they're reliable but they cannot compete at the level that they were competing last year, this should be considered a big problem. Their car seems to be fine, however. Their aero doesn't really shock anyone. They are basically on the money, but they're not really... I don't know, I have no idea. I cannot read that team actually. I can almost read all of the teams except for Alpine, because I didn't expect anything of what they did. The car seems to be slow, the car seems to be too stiff, the car seems to be reliable, which is weird for an Alpine. We will have to wait and see for the first race, maybe even the first 3 races, because I suspect that they might have gone on the wrong way on the setup and not necessarily on the design of the car. And maybe even just a suspension upgrade might actually fix things, but we need to wait and see, because just as with the next entry, which is Mercedes, they need to evolve a bit of their car. And speaking of Mercedes, let's take the step onto there. They're looking in worse shape than I was expecting. Their car clearly needs upgrades, they've already said so. There was an emergency meeting at the end of the day too, which was also unexpected. I expected to see a Mercedes that was cohesive, not really the fastest at all, I never expected that, but I expected them to actually put on a bit of a fight. And right now what I see is an understeery car, really understeery, honestly, and a car that the balance of the car isn't there. There was some issues. They actually parked the car, which is weird for a Mercedes because usually they are bulletproof. But overall, the car didn't really stood out to me. I think George right now is really lamenting his luck because he could have been on Mercedes and fought for championships a while back, but it is what it is. And I don't know how Lewis Hamilton will take this, because honestly, if he's on the car for the second year in a row where he cannot fight for the championship, which by the way he has never been in that position before, I don't know how he will feel. I don't know how Mercedes will overcome this little bump on the road per se, but we will have to wait and see. I expected with the upgrades, however, because Mercedes has an history of bringing good upgrades, that's for sure, and I expect that with the upgrades they will be much faster. Until then, it will be fun to see them maybe fighting with Aston. Now number 2 is Ferrari. I'm disappointed. If you saw my other video, you could see that I actually put Ferrari in first and that they would win the Constructor Championship. Now, I'm not so sure anymore. They've changed their philosophy while maintaining the idea of the car. So the design of the car is basically the same, a little bit more refined, obviously. I mean, it's an evolution of last year's car, but the SF23 isn't as good in the corners as we expected, and that's really the big issue. Sure, they will be able to keep up, especially in the next race, not the first race of the season, which is Bahrain, but in the second one they might, because it's a lot more straight lines instead of corners. But basically they have some issues on the corners. They must fix it because obviously it's an issue for Ferrari. Another thing that I've noticed is that the car is chewing up a lot of his rear tires, especially. Now, technical analysis. Bahrain is a rear limited circuit, which means that the first tires to go are the ones in the rear. And still, they were the ones with worst tire drag, I think, of all of the teams, which is, when you think about it, a really big issue. Because, yeah, sure, they can bolt hard tires and they will heat up a lot faster, but they will lose time because the Red Bull can just run with mediums and they need to stick with hard tires, which will be it will be interesting, but still I expected a little bit more from Ferrari. And finally we reach Red Bull. And here's the thing with Red Bull, they are way better than I actually expected them to be, just because of the 10% or 20% mid-tunnel penalization, which basically accounted to nothing because of Adrian Newey, which actually proves his genius once more. The car is planted, the car is fast, both in corners and in straight lines. It's basically an evolution of last year's car, like most of the grid is. The reality is they have built a great machine, and probably Max Verstappen will be champion again. I don't really see a world in which Perez can actually bring a fight to Max. That's just the reality of it. However, the car is looking really, 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 really good, and I don't think that Ferrari in the first race can actually do anything about it. They maybe can do something in Jeddah, but then again they will lose out in the races afterwards, mostly because of the tire drag, I think. But overall, the Red Bull just looks like a faster car. Once again, we are not really sure. We cannot be sure yet. And there's a lot of season to go still, because there's 23 races. Red Bull might win the first 5, remember last year with Ferrari. And then some upgrades may come and actually change the landscape of things. We need to wait and see. However, they're clearly the number one. They're clearly the favorites to take home the championship. And that's basically how it ends. This was the preseason testing. I hope you actually enjoyed it and actually got some insights on it. It's not really amazing and impressive or entertaining as I thought it might be. However, there's always good news. Next week we already have the first Grand Prix, and I personally cannot wait, even as a Ferrari fan who is about to have his dream crushed. Finally, Formula 1 is back and I'm happy. I'm delighted just for that. Thank you very much for watching. Have a beautiful day. Goodbye.